Okay, let's dig a little deeper into the national gun debate from a legal perspective with former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and current Cal Berkeley law professor John Yoo and criminal defense attorney Bob Bianchi, host of the Nothing But the Truth podcast. Great to have you both back, gentlemen.
Hey, Shannon. Thank you.
Hi, Shannon.
All right, I want to play what the president said tonight about the Second Amendment.
This is not about taking away anyone's guns. It's not about vilifying gun owners. In fact, we believe we should be treating responsible gun owners as an example of how every gun owner should behave. I respect the culture and the tradition and the concerns of lawful gun owners. At the same time, the Second Amendment, like all other rights, is not absolute.
Okay, so the president said it's not about taking away law-abiding citizens' guns, but the Daily Wire headline after the speech tonight said Biden claims gun control not about taking away rights before listing ways that he wants to take away rights. John?
Well, the president's right. There is no absolute constitutional right. Every right in the Bill of Rights has to be subject to reasonable restrictions and regulations. But I think some of the things the president's calling for might run afoul of the Second Amendment and maybe shouldn't be the subject of national federal legislation. Why not let the states decide for themselves how best to regulate guns? The kind of regulations that might be suitable for California or New York City are not the same ones we'd want in Nebraska or South Dakota. So I would say, for example, you could have expanded background checks. I think that would be clearly constitutional. Changing the age throughout the whole country for gun ownership, that might run into a Second Amendment problem. Banning certain kinds of weapons which are themselves not military in nature, but so for example an AR-15, which looks like a military gun but is not really any different than a long hunting rifle, that might run afoul of the Second Amendment. I think it's important that you go carefully through each regulation rather than trying to demand just kind of uniform national action just because we will all want to do something so badly after these terrible school shootings.
Yeah, and of course we do. I mean, we're horrified. We are heartbroken from Buffalo to Laguna to, Iowa tonight to Uvalde to another in Wisconsin, a shooting at a funeral today. I mean, it just seems endless, Bob, but we know what happens when we do knee-jerk legislation. A lot of people look back on the Patriot Act and point to that and say, gosh, a lot of unintended consequences when we were all very upset and angry and traumatized and wanting to do something right that we thought would make a difference. But frankly, the two sides on Capitol Hill right now don't sound like there's much meeting ground in the middle. I mean, the president's, press secretary said yesterday he has no interest in talking about hardening schools. I mean, if they're so diametrically opposed, how do they get to the middle somewhere where they can do something common sense that would actually make a difference?
I think that you actually saw a conciliatory tone with this president. I think he was also sending a message to the more liberal colleagues of his on the Democratic side saying there needs to be compromise. There's not going to be a perfect solution. So that's where he went from a ban on assault weapons, but if not that, then maybe raising the age to 21. By the way, we've done that on a national level, even with DUI cases, where the government has the ability as a national power that they have to basically force states to be able to do this kind of thing. So that's not difficult in my mind. He also talked about, which I think was very important, mental health. A lot of the individuals here, I can just tell you as having been the prosecutor myself, we were defunded on mental health services significantly from the federal government, leaving it to the states. The states didn't have an opportunity or ability really to be able to give mental health services to people. And the sad reality that became, Shannon, was that we got the best mental health services for people when they were already arrested for a crime in the county jail system, which was far too late. So what I think that what we heard here is that, and I agree, we need to all sit down. Everyone's not going to get the perfect bill. The liberal side of the Democratic Party is not going to get everything they want. The uber conservative side of the Republican Party is not going to get what they want. But something needs to be done. So I thought it struck the right tone. And I think that there are things. You know what? This is my last point. As a former law enforcement official that was worried about the protection of police officers and some of these incidents that you see right now, they're almost being sent into suicide missions with people that are wearing body armor, which I have another problem with, and weapons that have the ability, I agree, they're not, people think that they're automatic weapons. They're basically rifles, but they're high capacity magazines. And these police officers are put in very difficult situations like this.
Yeah, and that's the last thing we want. But also what's a bit frustrating to me as somebody who, my dad, my late father was a law enforcement officer and taught me be a great reverence and respect for firearms, and how also to properly use them, clean them, operate them, store them, lock them down. To hear people talk about different firearms and ammunition with incorrect terms and incorrect understanding of how things works, I mean, that's also frustrating, because I don't know how we can find solutions if we're not even all speaking the same correct language about what we're trying to do and what's actually being used here. I want to play this, though, from Congressman Mondaire Jones. He is a Democrat, and it sounds like he wants to go much further than what's currently on the table.
If the filibuster obstructs us, we will abolish it. If the Supreme Court objects, we will expand it, and we will not rest until we have taken weapons of war out of circulation in our communities.
So, John, there's a lot to unpack there, but that kind of statement seems like the one that will send Republicans or conservatives running away from any kind of conversation.
Well, first, of course, we got a Supreme Court case that's on the books, about to come out in the next few weeks, that's going to give us even more guidance on this balance between individual rights and reasonable regulation of firearms. But to say we're going to take away weapons of war, what weapons of war is the congressman talking about? There are no automatic weapons allowed to be used in the United States by civilians. Again, the weapons that people are using look like guns that are used by the military, but they are functionally the same weapons as hunting rifles. It might be the case that there might be restrictions on the size of magazines or the amount of ammunition that can be bought. Again, it's case by case, regulation by regulation, but to make blanket statements, we're just going to take away a certain class of guns, I think you're right, Shannon. That is going to raise political opposition. It's also going to run into the Second Amendment and could be the kind of thing that the Supreme Court and the lower courts might strike down.
Yeah, we'll wait for that case out of New York for the Supreme Court. We got to leave it there. So, Bob, when we're back next time, you kick us off. Thank you both for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.